Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal, and welcome to today's edition of the Search Engine Journal show. With me today, I have Lucas Long, the head of global privacy strategy at Ecommerce. Hey, Lucas, how's it going?
Doing well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. So, first of all, congratulations on the new book that you all published and put out. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself, InfoTrust, and the new book, which is the Crawl, Walk, Run: Becoming a Privacy-Centric Marketing Organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I am our head of global privacy strategy at InfoTrust. InfoTrust as an organization, we are a privacy-centric digital analytics consulting company. So kind of put a little bit more directly, we help client organizations to better collect and analyze data from across their digital assets. We really want to focus on, and we do focus on, helping them do so in a compliant and really privacy focused way. And that's really my role, is as like global head of strategy, helping organizations with that privacy strategy, making sure that they are compliant and they're also able to address core use cases for marketing, for advertising with the data that they're able to collect.
And what's interesting is that we've done a couple of episodes on ID oriented data and targeting, but InfoTrust, I believe you work more so with a lot of like larger multinational global brands which have multiple brands underneath their portfolios, right? So you're not just talking about targeting across sites, maybe sites that are all owned by one core company, but also country by country by country, region by region, privacy law by privacy law, et cetera, et cetera. Would you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you mentioned like identity platforms and identity services, and that's, a major piece of what the industry is really moving into. And our role as it kind of sits within that is helping organizations to start leveraging some of those tools. How can they do so? What are the best kind of tools to use? How can they do so in a compliant manner? And also in a manner that really respects the consumer expectations. Now, when we start talking about consumer expectations and we start talking about compliance, it becomes very complicated, as you mentioned, with large organizations that are working across different countries. So you have different regulations, things like GDPR, e-privacy in Europe versus all the state laws in the United States. So there are different restrictions for how can you use an identity service? How can you identify users? And for those users that you can identify, even what activities and what data can you start to leverage for any kind of advertising activity for those consumers?
That's great. And what are some of the industries that you specialize in?
So our primary focus is in the consumer packaged goods, CPG, working with a number of global multi-brand retailers there, as well as with multi-brand e-commerce retail types of organizations. So really, when the complexity gets dialed up, that's where we really focus. So in addition to those kind of core areas of focus, we also work quite a bit within the healthcare industry, finance vertical, as well as news and media. So again, areas where there is a bit more complexity, especially on the privacy front, are areas where we're able to really have the biggest impact.
So you're talking locations, industries, and then also target segments. Are there any when you're looking into CPGs and e-commerce brands, are there any specific challenges and solutions that show up there, especially with cross-country targeting, multi-state targeting, things like that on the e-commerce site, and the ability? So if I'm on one brand, and if I'm on a brand that's owned by one company, and I go to the site of a brand that's owned by the same company, what data is shared in between site to know that, hey, This could be an upsell opportunity based upon something that I looked for or maybe purchased on one of the other companies' sites, things along those lines.
Yeah, and that's really where a lot of the things are changing right now, right? As we talk about this whole privacy shift, I mean, we really try to break it down and focus on three core areas there in terms of consumer expectations. The regulatory environment changes there, which there is differences from country to country or state to state, as well as on the technology side. So when we're talking about ways in which to leverage data across different brand sites or even in a targeting context, we're really talking about those technology changes. So the means via which we can associate behavioral signals with a particular user and then identify that user across different locations to either target them or potentially provide them with more targeted or personalized recommendations, as well as on the regulatory side. So even if we can technically link that information together, can we use it for XYZ defined use case? Those things are, especially on the regulatory side, are going to differ based upon the location. But if we start with just on the technology side of things, traditionally, that's where third-party cookies have really played a big role, right? Because you're able to, with that third-party identifier, identify a particular consumer across different websites because it persists within their browser. So the actions of that user on site A are able to be then correlated or associated together with the actions of that user on site B. Those are completely going away by the end of next year once Chrome deprecates support, and basically all other browsers have already done so. So the ways in which we have in order to be able to identify those users and associated information together, that's really the core of what's changing right now.
In which direction do you see that going, and what are the solutions that you're able to bring to the table with some of your partners that you work with?
Yeah. So when we focus on even just privacy-centric marketing, there's three kind of core main pillars within that. The first one being respect the privacy of users. Second one being first-party ownership of first-party data. And then the third one being taking decisions and actions from insights. And so where this is going, kind of the keys for organizations really sit in those first two pillars here. Respecting the privacy rights of users or just respecting users. So developing a better relationship in order to be able to have them share information with you. That's really the only way, if we talk about cross-site linking or domain linking, the only way in which to identify a user across different locations is if there is some kind of a persistent identifier. So typically in the form of like an email or a login. So that's really where it starts. And then it gets into that first party ownership for that first party data, collecting the right information on each of those different properties, integrating it together so that we can then have that more centralized view and be able to take various different actions for that consumer.
Besides, so if I go to a travel, like almost any travel site right now, I get a
Yeah.
prompt to log in with my Google authorization through Google,
Yeah.
my Google account. That's one identification touch point. Besides login, are there any other identification touch points that are supplied by the big providers, whether it be Google, Meta, PayPal, etc.?
Yeah. So obviously, as you mentioned, you do have like single sign-in via Google. You can use the social login via Meta with a lot of those different providers. But also, even if we think in the payments context, which is kind of a new area, right? If I'm using Google Pay or if I'm using Apple Pay, that's associated with my account for them. Now, that doesn't mean you just have carte blanche to that type of data for linking that user together, but they do have that information. And for some use cases where it's not running afoul of regulations, that link and that context for even purchase data could be tied together and then used for other model creation, profile creation, or even just personalization down the road.
Yeah, that's really interesting because just like social logins help from a user experience perspective, the ability just to buy something with the click of one button, right? It's a
Yep.
great user experience, but it's also great data, even if you're already logged in, because you may log in with your Google account and then you may go ahead and pay with Apple Pay
Yep.
or with another your form of pay, or maybe even shop or something like that, right?
Yep.
So it sounds like, based upon the journey that the journey that's presented by the site, right, and the overall experience, but also the journey that's decided by the end user of the day, dictates which, I guess, which data is collectible. If I choose to utilize three different login tools for login payments and then maybe something else,
Yep.
or tend to stick to one, just utilizing only my Apple Face ID to log in, and then utilizing maybe Apple Pay and the end. So, is there benefit to a company for having part of that information, or just the login, or would a company like an Apple, a Google, or a Meta um, having exclusivity over that entire experience be more beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we should be making those decisions just user experience, right? Like, I want to make it as easy as possible for my consumers to do what it is that they want to do on the website. And so that's where I think a lot of that interoperability kind of comes in. So having those different providers, from like an advertiser perspective, what's important, for me is you need to develop that brand relationship with the individual and get that persistent identifier yourself. So that would be a login. A lot of organizations are starting to have users input things like email as a part of the checkout process.
Yeah.
Much larger focus on loyalty programs, rewards programs, and things like that. It is interesting though. A lot of people look at offers,
Yeah.
discounts. It's like every website that you go to now, hey, it's your first time here, log in or sign up with us, and here's this 10% discount. There's actually been some recent research that Google and Ipsos conducted not too long ago, where they actually found a slight decrease. They were looking at a positive privacy experience. So for things like consent and providing of first-party data, and brand trust with the organization, there's actually a lower level of brand trust gain for websites that had a good, solid privacy experience and offered a discount versus those that only offered a good, solid privacy experience. Likely because people then started thinking about, like, okay, well, how much is my data actually kind of worth to you? And is this more transactional relationship as opposed to, you trying to do something good for me? But that was something that's very interesting. So yeah, when you talk about ways in which websites or organizations can really drive that login, there's a lot of options on the table. But it's interesting to really think through the implications of some of the strategies being used.
And that login is beneficial for that site itself to have that first party data. And then that's
Exactly.
dependent upon third parties like Google, Meta, et cetera, to be able to segment, target, everything else.
Exactly. Yep. Once you have that login, that user, how we term it is that user is now a named addressable user, so long as they have consented to you advertising to them. So what you're able to do, kind of to your question earlier, if I am a multi-brand organization and I have a user that is logging in on multiple of my brand sites, well, now I can have a unified view of that particular individual. I can start to provide them recommendations and product offers based upon their behavior with another brand of mine. That's in that personalization context. But then in that targeting context, I can now start to use that for, say, retargeting lists, targeting those individuals on Meta or on Google, as well as to start to really feed those into some of those identity providers that you talked about earlier, to start really leveraging that information within the programmatic space as well. So it really is a key that unlocks so many doors for different tactics that are really the only things that are now available as we move into this new environment.
So speaking about now available, we talked about first party data via the login, right? The addressable user. We discussed the identification of user data via social logins, via third party logins, third party payment solutions. Are there any other offerings on the market that um, uh, site owners, companies, CMOs should be aware of to be able to also bring in any additional data that we haven't had a chance to go over today?
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily to bring in additional data, but in order to be able to get more from the data that you have, right? It's one thing to simply have like a web analytics platform to be able to get behavioral signals from your website, from your mobile app, but you also likely have CRM data. You know, you are also selling in a physical retail space. And so what becomes super important is that ability to link various different data sources together, so that we can start to integrate, we can start to really get to that like customer centric ideal that people have been talking about in marketing for what seems like 20 years at this point. But it's super critical. And then we can start to derive insights about, you know, who are my most valuable users? What are they interested in? What are they buying? So we can start taking actions, you know, from there. At that tactical level, you asked about like platforms in the web environment. A new kind of concept is this concept of server-side tag management or server-side data distribution.
Mhm.
Um, what that allows you to do is have a single data stream going up to your owned server. So you can start to do things like distribute the exact same data to all the various different advertising platforms that you're working with. You can enforce taxonomies, you can enforce consistency in data, which is then going to make it a lot easier for you downstream to start to do that integration. So that's, I think, the other really core area from like a tactical technology standpoint, that, you know, CMOs and folks should be aware of and start to really begin looking at, as soon as possible, really.
Kind of just got me thinking a little bit with gathering more data on the individual. Um, I I did pick up at Target for the first time the other day. So typically I'll just go in and something, but I just wanted to hurry. So it was actually my kid's Xbox controller, right? So I'm like, I don't feel like running in the Target trying to get this. Let me try this. So I go to the website, put in the information, find out that they have the controller right there, right? So then, of course, I have to log in to my Target account to be able to pay for it, which I think I used Apple Pay to pay for it, and then also um, set up the pickup. So when I set up the pickup, I pull up outside and it prompts me to download the app and maybe an upsell to be able to have the controller delivered directly to my vehicle, right? So as opposed to going inside and waiting at the pickup counter, which is also kind of a new thing. Like this is all like
Mhm.
the past couple of years, right? But it kind of got me thinking right now, like what you were saying about the trusted site and then having the offer. There's also a dimension of the trusted site and having the upsell, right? So like with Target, there was an upsell to download the app for me not to have to get out of my car to walk over to Target. With Walmart, there's Walmart Plus, where I think you pay like X with $12 a month, something like that, for a little bit extra of a boost, and then your delivery is free. But at the
Mhm.
same time, you kind of got me thinking there. When I pulled up the Target, I had to put in my vehicle, what color it is, what kind of car I drive, a lot of extra information for them to be able to convenience me by bringing that controller out to the vehicle. So not only do they have my purchase data,
Yep.
right, that Xbox whatever, and Xbox owner or whatever, age information, birthday, everything else, address, location, but they also have vehicle information, payment information, everything across the board, all from that transaction. So is there also in addition to what you're saying, because I know like with every e-commerce site I go to now, like as soon as you go on, you get a pop-up for 15%
Yep.
off, sign up, email, and then get an SMS text and utilize your 15% off code. There's probably X% of people that don't even utilize the code once they go through that whole entire process, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
Um, But on the flip side, talking about those loyalty programs, you're actually buying to upsell into the loyalty program.
Mhm.
Is that something that you've seen any studies on, or it's worth it for a company to not only get that ARR from those programs, but also to access more data from those programs as well?
In terms of studies, I'm not familiar with any kind of hard statistics, but it makes sense, absolutely. Um, we talked about email there as a means of joining together data sets and identifying people across domains. The other kind of booming industry right now related to that is with identity resolution. So that, and I know you've had some guests on in the past talking about that and some alternative identifiers.
Yeah.
That all relies upon the kind of signals that you can input to it. So the more signals, if you're able to input an email and an address and a phone number, it's more likely that that's going to match something within those identity graphs, and it's going to be able to improve your match rates as you start going, kind of across and working with different platforms. So that's where that utility is. I would be remiss though, in kind of the focus on privacy-centric marketing. I want to make sure that people don't really focus on, hey, I need to collect more now in order to be able to do the same things that I've done in the past. One of the kind of core focuses of a lot of the different regulations and even just being privacy centric in general is that concept of data minimization. So really thinking through for a particular use case, what is the bare minimum of user data that is necessary for me to be able to successfully accomplish that use case? And then designing your data collection strategies and everything really from there. For a lot of these different use cases, say Target wants to be able to provide you with better product recommendations. Well, yes, they can collect your car information and what make, model, color, and all that. Is that really going to improve their model for for product recommendations? Probably not. Walmart maybe because they do have car tires and everything else, but making sure that its purpose intent is there. And that's one of the things also putting those controls around the data that you are collecting. It is ubiquitous now. You are putting in that car information, but making sure that if the purpose for collecting that is simply to be able to identify where you are to deliver your goods, okay, have the systems in place to delete that data as soon as that happens, or keep it in your record, but only be used for that delivery type of a purpose. So yeah, I think that's a really important principle as well as we really think about privacy-centric marketing.
So you all had originally reached out to us, or we had met because you were promoting your book, Crawl, Walk, Run: Becoming a Privacy-Centric Marketing Organization. I was looking at some of the reviews and everything on Amazon as well. Pretty amazing reviews, pretty amazing quotes, testimonials, etc. I'm just really curious from a marketing perspective, how has the book launch uh, been in terms of a marketing endeavor for InfoTrust? What have the results been? I saw that you had a launch party. That's kind of exciting. So, how have the results been there from a marketing perspective? And how has it helped you with maybe authority building, brand building, inbound leads, anything along those lines?
Yeah, mostly that. Authority building, brand building. As with any marketing kind of objective or any marketing channel, it's important to put it in the context of where in the funnel is this supposed to be kind of targeted at, what segments. But it's helped significantly in those areas. Number one, for kind of education with current clients. What are the things that should be focused on as it relates to kind of roadmaps and moving into the future? And it's been very helpful in getting those types of messages to senior level folks within an organization to be able to start getting investment for various different activities that are going to ultimately help them move forward, moving into kind of a lot of these changes on the privacy front. Um, as well as just kind of from experts, kind of perception within the industry. We've also do a number of events and kind of trainings. We just 2 weeks ago, we were in London for a durability summit that we had put on with Google. And having the book and the really marketing efforts around that really helped to drive people to join and internalize the content quite a bit more.
Exactly. I feel like I get pitched 20 ebooks and white papers a day, but actually having something that's printed out that you can hold in your hand makes a big difference. I also see that you're selling it for like $14.99 on Amazon for the paperback, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And 100% of those proceeds go to our InfoTrust Foundation. So the charity work. So I personally see no monetary benefit, nor do my co-authors from the book, which is great. I mean, ultimately, what we're wanting to do again is to spread that word for what needs to be focused on in order to be able to be successful in that new environment.
Excellent. Well, Lucas Long, thank you so much for jumping on the show today. Lucas, where can we find you online?
Yeah, LinkedIn, obviously. Lucas Long on LinkedIn. Also, a lot of content. Obviously we have the book, but content in general on our website, infotrust.com, as well as content on our software website, taginspector.com.
Taginspector.com?
Yes, taginspector.com.
Great. We'll drop all the links to the book, to the InfoTrust site, and to Tag Inspector as well. And our wrap up of today's show, and when we send out the audio version, I know we have in the show notes and everything else. Lucas, it's been a pleasure having you on today, learning more about the world of global privacy, especially with large consumer brands and e-commerce and the different data touch points that companies can look at to better run their overall campaigns and making sure that they're following privacy standards across borders. Anything you'd like to add before we end the show today?
No, I mean, focus primarily, yes. My one parting thought is for organizations to focus on that first principle that I mentioned earlier. Key in on respecting the privacy of users. Put that at the center of your strategy. Focus on what consumers want and really move forward from there.
Great. Words of wisdom from Lucas Long and InfoTrust. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again. And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners for chiming in today. It's been a pleasure. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.